Of course, we're hoping we're going to have a huge impact and resonance internationally with partners in Africa, but we also want to make a difference within the university. So I'm going to turn now to Foluke and Julio to talk about the work being done and that we could further in relation to decolonising the curriculum and engaging students here at Bristol. Foluke.
Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me? I'm going to try and be brief, which is a big ask for me because I tend to ramble, but I know we all have Zoom fatigue. So I think a brief introduction to who I am. I teach at the law school, University of Bristol, and my scholarship focuses on decolonization generally. I do have a background as a solicitor and barrister in Nigeria, so quite brief, and then I fled the profession. And I also at the same time, so during the same time, I was involved in a legal aid clinic. So we provided free representation for people who were not able to afford to pay for legal services. And I think a lot of my scholarship derives from that experience of trying to use law in Nigeria. In Bristol, I set up FACE, which stands for Forever Africa Conference and Events, which it is a Pan-African initiative, student-focused, and it's based on decolonial principles. And I also write a blog, which I named after myself and Africa, so it's Foluke's African Skies. So I have a deep love for the continent, and I try and marry, the love of the continent with decolonial principles, such that the idea of decolonization or decolonial principles are not based in sort of almost esoteric atmosphere. So for me, decolonial approaches, and I tend to use the phrase decolonial approaches rather than decolonization, because I think decolonial approaches suggest that this is a way of being. It's something that we constantly strive to achieve. We're moving towards perfection, rather than decolonization, which suggests an end point, done, dusted, and we don't need to do anything else. So it's a tick box. And that's how it feels to me. Not saying you should, definitely agree with me, but I prefer to use the phrase decolonial approaches. So I think it means for me, among other things, recognizing the current as well as historical power imbalances in knowledge production, transmission, essentially whose knowledge has value, and what do we use knowledge for? In the words of Arturo Escobar of the Latin American Critical School, decoloniality means bringing about worlds otherwise. And I think this is important for me because a lot of the conversation around decolonization, and it's often called decolonization, in the UK especially, but also elsewhere, doesn't actually center decolonial approaches to research. So we're happy to decolonize the curriculum by adding a few, non-normative names to the reading list, or changing the names especially in law, changing our names in the problem questions from, I always say, changing the names in the problem questions from Mary to Muhammad, and then, that's decolonization, because we're focusing on the curriculum. However, if we're thinking very much in terms of a research-led teaching or research-oriented teaching, what feeds into the curriculum is the research. So this is, to me, particularly concerning because of the history of the academy or university in Africa. So there's a long history that we need to think about, and how this history is connected with what we are and who we are now. And I'm really happy that PARC is focusing on decolonization, and I think Bristol is really well placed in that sense. The history of Africa, African descended people in Bristol is a path which is well trodden. It is I would say it's very important for us that we see how the effects of this history manifest in our curriculum, in our research, how we choose our research questions, what we decide to research, how exactly we map the success of research. I often, fear that we think of research as successful if it gets published, rather than if the people on the ground, the people who we are researching, who we've chosen this research question for them, if they actually benefit from the research in question, or if they would choose for themselves a different research topic, a different research agenda. And I think how we go about deciding what and where and how to research is very, very important. And I really hope that the work of PARC addresses this. And this does seem to be the direction in which the work is headed, and really happy to hear from the previous speakers. I'm also concerned with how much of Africa is missing from our teaching and research in higher education generally, but specific to Bristol as well. A couple of the speakers earlier today have mentioned how Africa is a growing population. So a significant portion of the world in 2050, and I can't do maths, this is why I decided to do law, so I'm not going to get the numbers right. So a significant proportion of the world by 2050 is going to be from Africa. So it should be concerning to us if we are, talking about an internationalization of education, decolonization of education, and Africa is not centered in what we teach, how we teach, and what we research. And again, I do hope, and I do, it's not, I don't think it's a futile hope. I do see that PARC is headed in the right direction. And I hope that this will be reflected in our curriculum and in our research agendas as we go forward. Seems clear to me that we cannot build worlds otherwise without knowledge from and engagement with Africa. So I look forward to cheering on the work of PARC and working with PARC when appropriate. Thank you.
That's excellent. Thank you very much, Foluke, and we share your ambition.